This online practical tutorial is to help externalize Qlik scripts into QVS using Microsoft Visual Studio Code, integrating it seamlessly with Jira to be able to work on tickets and to be able to push through code and development and connect and update Jira tickets, as well as create a repo with version control inside Bitbucket, which is also part of the Atlassian suite of software. The pieces of software you will need are Microsoft Visual Studio Code and also Git, as well as have an Atlassian account, either cloud or a custom account, for a custom deployment of Jira and Bitbucket, which might be unique to your own organization. Once Microsoft Visual Studio Code is installed and opened, click on the four little cubes on the left-hand side to add extensions. The first extension, search for Qlik, and find Xavier Hahn's extension for Qlik. The second one, search for Jira and get the Jira and Bitbucket extension for Visual Studio Code. Search and install these two extensions. Make sure your Jira and Bitbucket instances are open in a browser window for the whole setup process. Then, you need to go into Bitbucket in order to create a QVS code repository there. Click on Create Repository, and you'll be able to attach it to a specific project. So you can either create a project or use an existing one. Add in your repository name, as well as a default branch name if you want to. Once you've done this, you can click on Create Repository, and it'll create a repository within Bitbucket. When this is done, go back to Visual Studio Code and log into your instance of Atlassian using the extension inside VS Code in order to be able to synchronize between Jira and Bitbucket within VS Code itself. You'll be asked to authenticate on certain pages, which will open up in your web browser. Accept the given authorization request for synchronization, which will then allow VS Code and Jira to communicate with one another. Do the same thing with Bitbucket so that in the Bitbucket tab in Atlassian extension so that you're authenticated against both the instances of Jira and Bitbucket that you want to be connected to. Once you've connected, you should be able to see the Jira issues, but you might not as yet be able to see the connection with Bitbucket. We'll get back to this right now and do one last thing before debugging that part. You have to clone and create a local repository on your local machine, which will then sync up with the repository in Bitbucket itself. So I'm going to use the git command prompt to be able to get there, which has been installed with Git itself. I open the git command prompt, and I change the directory to wherever it is the folder on my local machine where I want to install the Bitbucket repo clone. I then go into Bitbucket on my browser and click on the clone button. You then click on the copy button to be able to get the full git command. Go back to your CMD prompt, your git CMD prompt, and paste the whole thing in and hit on enter. And everything else should synchronize properly, and your local copy of the Bitbucket repo is created and ready to go. If you now go back into your source control in your VS Code, which is identified by the three dots with the network diagram on the left-hand side, click on Open Folder and navigate back to the folder which contains your local machine copy of the Bitbucket repo you just created. Select that folder and you click on the Select Folder button. You should now see that your VS Code folders are connected to your local repository copy. Now, let me give you a practical example of how to be able to push code and coordinate with the Jira ticket and working in sprints. First thing I'm going to do is create a Jira ticket for my intro example. Let's say, for example, I am tasked with creating fully automated incremental load for data extraction from Salesforce. I create my ticket, put in a description, put in a summary. As you can see, there are quite a number of drop-downs. They're all the same as they are in Jira itself. You can add the priority, you can add an epic link, and so on and so forth. Usually, if you cannot see the assignee at any moment in time, if you click on Submit and you go back into the ticket, you will then be able to see yourself and your colleagues in the drop-down for assignees inside the ticket. I click Save, and when I scroll back upwards, I can see the Jira ticket has been created. And now I should be able to search for the assignees list. I should be able to type myself out, and I can see all of the people I can assign to it. Now the ticket is created, technically speaking, I am responding to a ticket request. In order to complete work, you can start on the coding itself. I go to my local repository folder structure, which is given by the two document buttons on the left-hand side. I'm going to create a file, give it the extension .qvs. I call it as SFDC fully automated incremental.qvs. And once I've created that file, I can then go in and put in my work on my code. Once my code is in and complete, I'm going to save this new file. This is the same as making changes to pre-existing files and making changes to save them also. So the first thing to do is to update the file inside your local repository. Click on Save to save it to your local repository. I can see on my source control button on the left-hand side a number which indicates the new change is ready to sync with the repo. If I look at the Kanban board in Jira, I can see my ticket is sitting now in backlog, and this is the one that I'm working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the changes I want to push, stage them by clicking on the plus sign next to them. This puts them in staging. I'm then going to enter a comment using smart commits, which you can Google which you can Google up if you want to find out a little more about them. I put in the ticket number SD-2. Make sure that you put the dash. This is very important. And because I want to change the status from backlog to in progress, I put hash in progress. I want to add in a little bit of time, so I'm going to put in hash 2 days 4 hours, 2D4H, which is what I might have worked on for this specific ticket. I also can go in and put in a little comment. I'm going to put in hash comment, and if you see now, I've shot over the maximum number of amount of characters. There's a limit of 50 characters inside the comment that you can put into a message for a code change. So therefore, try to keep it as short as possible and as efficient as possible. Now I'm going to click on commit with the little tick box. So the commit is going to make it fully ready to sync with Bitbucket, with the Bitbucket repository. I then sync against the repository in Bitbucket. So I'll first do a last change because I have a couple of changes that are outstanding. I then can sync against the repository in Bitbucket with that last little circle next to the master that I'm clicking on now. There, that one. What we can do is now go back to the browser to be able to see how this reacts and how this synchronizes. So now I refresh my Jira browser window. And you'll be able to see the ticket has been moved over from backlog directly into progress via that smart commit command that I've put in. And also, I've added in my little comment, the V1.0 release, as it should have added in also the extra time that I've worked on the full for the full update to be done. Not only does Bitbucket, not only on the Bitbucket repository which I've pushed, but also the Jira ticket itself. So the full synchronization should have happened. What I like about using VS Code for making changes inside scripts is that it is quite easy to see the file dependencies across all scripts rather than having to open QES one after the other. So let's say, for example, if I'm looking for an SQL data.qbd that I know that I'm calling for in a specific file by doing a search in VS Code, I'll be able to look at all the other scripts and that will tell me where the dependencies are. I can do the same thing with field names and backtrack codes and fields and how fields are created throughout my ETL. And it is much easier to navigate and go around a high number of scripts, especially if they are intertwined and have a great amount of dependencies. If I go back to Bitbucket, the information there is the same as in VS Code timeline window, where you'll be able to see the history of each code pushed out by one by one. Inside the dropdowns, you can always have a full control and vision over the version, which also makes it easier to move back to older versions if you have any issues with your scripts without having to create QVF copies if you're working directly in these as you would in a normal environment. Refreshing the browser or the repo, first of all, you'll be able to see in the message that it is attached a Jira ticket with a hyperlink. If I click on this, I'll be able to see a little short synopsis of the ticket inside from Jira. So it's fully coordinated with the different parts of the suite between VS Code, the Bitbucket repo, and Jira itself. Ideally, as I have implemented a client environment lately for the development process of that client, you can create a master.qvs, which uses the document name function, the Qlik document name function, and does a folder scan inside the QVS folder. Name the QVF exactly the same as the QVS and the appropriate QVS that needs to be launched with it. The end result of this is that you can have carbon copies of all the QVF scripts that point to the same master.qvs, which is then able to connect to the right QVS script to the QVF that is named the same. VS Code, Jira, Bucket are all synchronized and fully automated in such a way all development is within the repo, and there are no scripts nor needs for further script adjustments inside the Qlik environment, inside the QVS themselves. Thank you very much. Please leave your comments.